So aloha, Dr. Hams. It's so nice to see you here. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. And agreeing for this interview for our microbiology project for the Hawaiʻi Community College. So I have a few questions for you.
All right.
So I just wanted to say for the viewers that Dr. Hams is an author of this book, which is Mushrooms of Hawaii, and I believe this is part 1, right?
Yeah.
And there is also part 2 of Mushrooms of Hawaii. And here we have some questions.
Okay.
Okay, let's start.
Fire away.
So my first question was a little bit more personal. How did you first become interested in fungi? Why did you decide to study fungi out of everything?
Yes. Well, I started in undergraduate school, and I did directed research with a professor, and we worked with things that are called slime, little slime molds, and in studying of fungi with that professor. I was in the Midwest, and wasn't really studying mushrooms or things like that, but these little slime molds and how they interact with each other. And then, when I went to graduate school first, we would go to national meetings, and we had the people, the cell biologists, those that worked with, studying the cells of the fungi and so on, and biochemists and stuff. But those were the people that named mushrooms, actually did the taxonomy of it. And I remember we would always go, cell biologists and so on, and we would, they'd always have a foray to a very nice forest, so we'd always go along to see, and we'd look over their shoulders and they say, oh yes, that's an amanita, or that's a lepiota, and we'd laugh because we didn't have any idea about that. But already I was into mycology. And then when I went to graduate school here in Hawaii, I worked in a laboratory almost all the time. I was what we call a lab rat. We were doing cell biology. We had an electron microscope here where we looked in the cells of fungi and how they studied how they grow and stuff like that. And then that process of looking through the microscope, at the high-powered microscope, became so expensive that we just couldn't do it here. And the United States set up certain regional centers where they had the technicians and the equipment because it was so expensive, and you had to travel there to do your research. And for us in Hawaii, that was just too expensive. So I was really looking for another thing to study other than working in the lab all the time. And, all the bird people had been to Hawaii and told us about the honey creepers and so on. The flowering plant people had been here to tell us about silver swords and all the special flowering plants of Hawaii. And insect people had been here, tell us about the Kamehameha butterfly and so on. But there hadn't been any mycologists to Hawaii. Wow. And, we are the evolutionary capital of the world, and I realize I'm sitting on a gold mine here. Nobody studied fungi in Hawaii, and I live here, and there are no other mycologists. So I said, that is something I would like to study. But the problem is, I am not a taxonomist. I'm a cell biologist, worked in the lab all the time. So I reached out to try to, combine with someone who would help me with the identification of the mushrooms. And I remember I took all my photos. I took a lot of photos of mushrooms in Hawaii, and I took them to a national meeting in San Antonio, Texas. And I had 2 students with me from UH Hilo, and we put up a big billboard poster with all these beautiful pictures on there. And I was trying to snag somebody, and so this friend of mine, Dennis Desjardins from San Francisco State University, when he looked at that, his eyes got as big as pizzas, and within a week we wrote a federal grant to study the mushrooms of Hawaii. And we didn't know anything, nobody knew anything about the mushrooms. And so we started from going from mountaintop to seashore on every island. We actually did it for 25, 30 years. We did this every year for and my goal always was to have this field guide, a field guide to mushrooms of Hawaii. And So that's how it all got started. And we'd go until we thought we had seen most of them, of each group, of each family, or of each genus of mushrooms. Once we thought we'd seen most of them, you can never see them all. You can't cover every square inch of all the islands every day, of the year. But then we said that this time we have to stop now and publish the book. It's time to do that. And so that's how we got going.
Yeah, no, that's a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. My other question was, what brought you to Hawaii? Why did you decide to go to Hawaii?
Well,
you said you started here when you wrote.
Yeah.
Why Hawaii of all places?
Well, my undergraduate professor, advisor in Iowa, knew a person in Hawaii at Manoa on Oahu who had an opening for a graduate student. And he said, why don't you go to Hawaii? And I had never flown in an airplane and I had never been anywhere outside of the cornfields of Iowa, and it sounded really good to me. And so we flew out here and started working in the laboratory again. I was doing all cell biological things, and that brought me here. And of course, I fell in love with Hawaii. With I do a lot of scuba diving and hiking in the mountains and all that type of thing. I was in love with it. And when I got my master's degree here, so I was 2 years here to get my master's degree, I went off to get my doctorate somewhere else. So I went to, first of all, to Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. And that was a terrible time. It was the height of the Vietnam War. And I got, there was a draft. I got classified 1A. So I was ready to go to Vietnam. And they didn't know what to do with graduate students. Undergraduates like me had a 2S deferment during undergraduate studies. But once you were in graduate studies, they didn't know what to do with you. And so they left it up to your local draft board. And so 4 farmers in Iowa sat down and decided, if you can get your PhD in 2 years, you don't have to go to Vietnam. And I asked at Purdue, could I get my PhD in 2 years? And they said, no way. So I called back to Hawaii and said, if I come back, could I get my PhD? And, my professor was smart enough to know that they would forget about me or lose me, if I came back to Hawaii. So my wife and I got back on an airplane and flew back to Hawaii and started for my PhD. And of course, it took me 3 years to get it, but then the Vietnam War really wound down and ended at that point. So that's how I got back to Hawaii.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, what a story.
It's a historical thing. It's
Yeah.
hard to believe that happened. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. Wow.
Yeah.
So my other questions are more about actually mushrooms or,
Sure.
or fungi.
Yeah. Yeah.
And less about you. So we knew that Hawaii is the most isolated island chain in the world.
Mhm.
So how does it influence fungal diversity? So yeah, like you mentioned, if we're speaking about birds, we knew how it
Yes.
influences that.
Yeah.
If we're speaking about insects, we knew about like lots of species.
Yeah.
But what about mushrooms?
We didn't know how that would work out. The distribution of endemic mushrooms, whether there were even endemic mushrooms at all. And what we found out through all of our studies, that indeed Hawaii has lots of endemic mushrooms not seen anywhere else in the world. Of course, we have colleagues who are studying in Indonesia and China and throughout South America, the Caribbean, and so on, and they've never seen anything like these mushrooms that we have here. And the distribution is like this. The endemic mushrooms are above 4,000 feet, and that's kind of true with the flowering plants. It's true with the birds and so on. Anything below, like Volcanoes National Park is 4,000 feet, and the Saddle area. If you go below that, every mushroom is introduced. It's been described from the mainland or from somewhere else, and you just don't find any, I don't use the words native, endemic mushrooms that are just, special to Hawaii. But everything above, like way over 90%, like 95% of every mushroom you find is found only in Hawaii and nowhere else in the world. And so after we had done our studies, we decided to give all these endemic mushrooms Hawaiian names. So we went to Kalena Silva, who was a chair of the Hawaiian Studies Department, and we said, here's the photos of all these mushrooms. What should they be called? And so you think about the Hawaiian history. I cannot find a kapuna anywhere that can say what the word for mushroom was in Hawaiian. Obviously, they had a word for mushroom, but it didn't get translated. And so every elder that I can find, that knows the language and that, I ask, is there a word for mushroom? There are recent ones like pepeao, the ear fungus, but those are recent names that have been added. So we took these photos to Kalena Silva and his group of professors here at UH Hilo, and they gave them Hawaiian names. So we named some after Pele, Madam Pele, and gave them descriptive names like the Hawaiians would. Like we have Vaulipo, which means growing in a dark place in the rainforest, like that, and Pakelo, which means slippery like a fish. If you pick up this mushroom, it'll go down to your elbow, fall off your elbow, because it's very viscid and slimy like that thing. And so we have named, I don't know how many we've named, but we've probably named close to 50 new undescribed species from Hawaii. And we've validated this by going to national meetings and showing the pictures of them, and nobody's jumped up and said, oh no, but that's found in Japan or somewhere like that. And everybody just marveled, because the Hawaiian endemics, many of the mushrooms are very colorful, and they're pinks and yellows and oranges and stuff like that. And we're sure that the Hawaiians would have seen them. They would have seen them in the forest, but they weren't remarkable for these reasons. None of them are poisonous. They taste terrible. Poisonous have been significant in that people died from eating them. And they taste terrible. So we always take, because some mushrooms taste like radishes or sweet corn or something like that. And these are all patui. They taste terrible, So obviously they weren't used as food for them. And they were not hallucinogenic. There were no hallucinogenic mushrooms before cattle were introduced into Hawaii by Vancouver in the 1800s. And so it's not like Mexico, where they have lots of hallucinogenic mushrooms, where the people would talk to their ancestors and perceive the future.
From Siberia, it's also very common.
Yes, yes. So they were probably fairly unremarkable to the Hawaiians for those reasons, and yet they surely saw them, because they're so, the bird hunters and stuff would go into forest, would surely have seen them, but there was no word for mushroom in the Hawaiian language as we can find.
So you think that, I don't have this question in my list, but I wanted to ask, so you think that we find endemic mushrooms only above 4,000 feet because of the history of Hawaii, because the history of the colonization, basically,
yes,
development, land development.
Right. Yes, a lot of the degradation of forests and so on. That's probably true. And all these introduced mushrooms surely came through agriculture, and of course millions of tourists coming every day, spores on their shoes and stuff, and some of them then take off and grow here. So since we've published this field guide, new mushrooms have showed up that are not in the field guide. This is called Murphy's Law. The day after you publish the book, there was a mushroom all over this campus. I had never seen it in Hawaii before, but it was all over the place.
Probably one of the students.
Yeah, and it could be. And then I haven't seen it again. So we think that some of the mushrooms may have up to 10-year cycles, where they fruit, and then 10 years later they have biological clocks that they can read day length or year length or decade length periods of time. I have a lot of evidence for that. If I had another lifetime to come and study, I would look at these types of things, and it would be good project for somebody that's going to be here for a while, that they could, see if these mushrooms are here, and then if they ever show up again 5 years later or something like that. Because there is evidence now that they do have biological clocks, that, not just day length or length of day, but actually an internal clock. Yeah.
Really interesting. So what do you think, like what percent of Hawaiian fungi are endemic, approximately, you would think?
Yeah.
Really I understand it's really hard to say, so you say some species come and go.
Right, and if we're just talking about mushrooms, of course there are many different kinds of fungi.
Or fungi,
I don't know. Maybe 5%, something like that, are endemic. Because lots of introductions here right now. Yeah.
Thank you. So now, what mushrooms or fungi? Let's talk about fungi. What fungi are especially you like the most? Which ones are your favorites?
I have lots of favorites, but there are very interesting ones. I had a lot of reports from people like teachers on Oahu that would go early in the morning to school, and they would actually see mushrooms glowing in the dark, in the early morning. And, I always went, oh boy. But I never went out at night to look for these mushrooms. And then there's some folks on Kauai that took photos of these clusters of bioluminescent mushrooms, that they're almost enough that you could hold them like a flashlight, and they would light up at night there. And those are introduced to Hawaii, and so far they've stayed in Kauai. Now, I had no reports of it from any island other than that. But then there's another giant thing. It gets several inches across, and it grows in big clusters. So nobody's going to miss this. And I first found it, a person called me up from Kauai and said, I have these giant mushrooms all over my lawn. And, in those days, I got on an airplane in the morning in Hilo, flew to Oahu, and then flew to Kauai, and went, oh my goodness, what is this? I'd never seen this before. In all my studies, I'd never seen it. And then I was going to a regional meeting in Florida, and there was a poster where they described all these giant mushrooms. Some of them in South America, Central America, get to be almost a meter across, several feet across the cap, just gigantic mushrooms. And so this one in Hawaii, it's an obvious introduction. It's an introduced thing. We found it on Kauai. Then it spread to Oahu. And then it spread to Maui. And now it's all over the Big Island. So somehow it spreads from island to island like that. And since it's large clusters, people would trip over them. They all, we have a website, Mycologists of Hawaii. Everybody reports, oh, what is this? A big thing we found like that. So I get all their reports. And that's a spectacular one. And the question is it edible? Everybody wants to eat it, And it goes on this side. In the Japan tabletop, coffee table books, they have something that may be the same thing, that they have had 4-star edible. It's really a good edible. And then some guys found them on Kauai and started selling them at the farmer's market. And then I got calls from the emergency ward that they had all these people that had eaten these mushrooms at the farmer's market, and they were all throwing up all over their room like that. So to some people they may be toxic, and who knows how they prepared them, if they ate them raw. I hope not. They should be cooked or something. So when people ask me, with these giant mushrooms here, can we eat them? I always say, well, I say be careful, that some people have been poisoned by them and so on. So that's a spectacular one that you don't forget. But probably for me, the most important or spectacular ones to me are the endemic ones, that you find in growing in the rainforest. beautifully colored and so on like that. Yeah.
What about slime molds? Your first
My first love. I love slime molds. Yes. You know, I'm probably going to give another lecture on. There are 3 different kinds of slime molds. There are the cellular slime molds, which I used to study, and then there's the plasmodial slime molds, which people see. I mean, they get huge. They get up to a centimeter, maybe half a centimeter in size. They're tiny little things. And I was looking on the internet today. People found a whole bunch of them and said, what are these types of things? And the plasmodial slime molds, you know, they grow by amoebae. And those amoebae gather together to make a fruiting body. And like I say, they're tiny, but they're very beautiful. You know, if you look at them under a microscope, so slime molds are.
Do we have endemic slime molds in Hawaii or not?
You know, we've studied them. We had a person from Sweden come here and study them, and they didn't find anything different than has already been described. But I have found over 100 species here in Hawaii of slime molds. And the way you usually find them is you trip over something and fall down, and then you're at the level with the slime molds. And you look on old leaves or twigs and stuff. And we had my colleague from University of Arkansas, Fred Spiegel, studied slime molds here, and they take substrates, like they take dead leaves or twigs or stuff and put them on nutrient agar, and then the slime molds grow out on this type of agar there. So you can culture all these types of slime molds quite easily in the lab. But I don't think we have any that have not been described before. Yeah.
So what do you think? So introduced fungi we have on this island, are mostly from the United States, from the continental US, or you think they are from the other countries as well? So what do you mentioned those big ones are from Florida, probably.
Well, there are ones there. The ones that we have probably came from Japan. You know, so we're getting species like the bioluminescent ones, I think is from the Orient. It's widely known from the Orient area. These big giant ones probably came in with sugar cane, maybe with machinery, you know, that was brought over to cultivate sugar cane here, and we don't know. But they come from all over, you know, and again, like I said, with so many tourists coming, you know, it would be interesting to culture off their shoes and off their pant legs and stuff like that to see what they're all bringing in, you know, like that.
So is it different from the continental US species, or is it some of them are?
Some of them are, yeah. Most of them are.
How many of them would you say are from the other countries, like Japan? Maybe Asia, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I don't really know how many, but yeah, they come from all over. You know, yeah.
So a lot of them are from Asia.
Yeah. So, you know, to talk, a lot of people theorize, how did the mushrooms get here? How did the fungi get here?
Yes, that was my next question.
Okay. Well, you know, there are high level winds that come from Australia, you know, that area. And we think that a lot of ours have that origin. And so the spores can get up in the jet stream, and then you get millions of years for them to rain down on Hawaii, and then some of them take and start growing. Yeah, like oceanographic ships have gone out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and put out a net, and you can actually catch insects falling out of the sky, you know, because they're up in those jet streams like that. And surely if the insects could blow over here, you know, they can have fungal spores on them themselves, and the fungal spores can be in the jet stream and they'd rain down on Hawaii. So we think that most of their origins were from the Australian area.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, of the endemic things. But the introduced things, they come with tourism and agriculture and everywhere. Yeah.
Shoes.
Yeah, from shoes, yeah.
Yes. So yes, my question was like, how do fungi originally reach Hawaii? Like,
yeah.
So we think it's winds, not birds, not rafts, not.
Oh, it could be. Yeah.
Do we know if any fungi came with like Polynesian voyagers.
Oh, everybody that came would be carrying some spores, surely with it. Surely on wings, the 3 W's on wings of birds,
Yes.
You get seeds on their feathers, stuck to their feathers. So certainly fungal spores could be on their feathers too when they come. On waves, that bring in big logs, like at Waipio Valley, I've seen great big logs that obviously came from the Pacific Northwest. And if they get a big enough pile of them, a raft of them, that those seeds and spores would be out of the salt water, the whole time. And so they'd get here being alive, and so they could be introduced that way. And
I know a lot of seeds could survive
Sure.
being in the salty water.
Yeah.
And we know that gecko eggs could. Right. So probably mushroom spores or fungi spores.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. They'd come there. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Since there are so many different species of endemic mushrooms in Hawaii, do we see actually adaptive radiation for the Hawaiian fungi? Similar to the birds or insects, or is it not really the case?
No, I don't think that's really the case that we see. They have the morphologies of all known families of mushrooms that are here, and no special ones. The one special thing that I see is a lot of very bright colors in the mushrooms, but
which is specific to Hawaii.
Well, if you find enough of the endemic ones, a lot of them are colorful. But what else was I going to say about that? But anyway, I haven't seen any special adaptations, like that. But, we were talking about fungi, too. There are many other fungi, and once people knew that there was somebody in Hawaii studying fungi, then people want to collaborate. Because I can show them around, right? And they don't know where to go unless somebody can show them. So the first person who came was studied wood rotting fungi. So these aren't mushrooms, but fungi that rot logs and stuff in there. And then we had several people come. And slime mold people came, and so we had a lot of people all joining together to study fungi in general, not just mushrooms. Because Dennis Desjardins was the mushroom person who really knew the taxonomy and of them. So we had a whole group. Hawaii became famous, and this all. This culminated in, we had a joint meeting between the Japanese mycologists and the American mycologists here in Hawaii. Over 500 mycologists came from 18 different countries. And
where was it?
It was held right here on campus.
Oh, nice.
In the campus center, and I wanted to involve the community in this too, because all of these people are scientists giving scientific talks and stuff like that. And so I asked my friend, now I'm losing my mind here, to come over and give a talk. And he came, and we had standing room only people 2 nights in a row in the biggest room over there in the campus center. So we got the people in there. There's lots of people interested in mushrooms. And, the rage right now is foraging. Foraging is the word. And it's just all over, the United States and in Hawaii and stuff like that. Is everybody's out in the field picking mushrooms, and that's always a dangerous thing for a scientist. It might be edible to somebody and then toxic to some other person. So you have to be careful. You can get sued if somebody dies from eating them. And by the way, I don't know if you've read in the paper that there's been a lot of poisonings in California right now of eating deadly amanitas and stuff, and people dying from eating them.
I know a lot of mushrooms, the edible ones, have twins, which are
lookalikes,
or lookalikes, which are similar, but they could be like completely poisonous to people, and that sometimes if you're not a specialist, it's very hard to distinguish
That's right. Yep.
one from the other. Do you have a book on the edible mushrooms of Hawaii?
No, I